That's good. Savannah, and I'm going to take you guys out to the cemetery. Y'all sit back, enjoy the scenery. I'll be popping in and out with some ghost stories and a few little extras. And on River Street, if anyone feels like it, you can yell at some of the folks walking by. One of the more popular verses are, "We're looking for bodies." So y'all sit back and enjoy. A lot of these buildings here on the right used to be cotton warehouses built in the 1800s. When yellow fever broke out in Savannah, several of these buildings were used to quarantine the yellow fever slaves. And as some of them died, a lot of them were buried in the basements of these buildings. There's been a lot of bones excavated out. And there's a particular business here which I'm not allowed to name the name of. But they used to have locks on their bathroom doors, and so many of their guests would hear footsteps and then mysteriously got locked in as they completely removed the locks from the doors.
This will get you seasick with the cobblestone.
I see pro people.
Wanna come get you? All kinds of stuff. Y'all think it's clear?
What year is this?
84.
This one?
This car? 84.
Yeah. Oh, 84. Oh God, I rode right around an 88 truck all the time. It's a big deal.
Hey, give us a ride!
We're coming to get you!
Losers!
We're coming to get you!
A little touristy information for y'all. Over on your left is the Savannah River. Across the river is Hutchinson Island. Directly across from us, the Convention Center. And to the right, the beautiful but slowly sinking Weston Hotel.
Is it sinking?
Yeah, it's sunk a little bit over 3 inches in the last 4 years.
Uh-oh. Just like Panasonic. Panasonic. Is that? Yeah. The Sequoia, it's like 6 inches the first year they built it.
Look, everything's dated now. What about that?
Oh, that's funny though. Everything's that, I get it.
The beautiful Mulberry Inn on the left was once a Coca-Cola bottling company. And the square directly in front of us, named after George Washington, from the early 1800s and for over a century, was the site to the largest bonfires in the United States on New Year's Eve. If you notice, this is the only square that doesn't have any large trees near the center. The last bonfire occurred in 1951. I also read in the late 1700s they burned some witches at the stake here. Was a pirate house. Most of it built as early as 1794. If anyone's ever read the book Treasure Island or Robert Louis Stevenson, some of the book refers to Savannah and the pirate house. This is where pirates and sailors would stay while their ship was harbored here. Mean and ruthless pirates were here, like Blackguard, Billy Bones, and many others. Well, a lot of these pirates needed workers on their ships. They would get young men and boys drunk at night and shanghai them onto their ship. By the time they awoke, they'd be far out to sea. There are several tunnels under the pirate house that lead out to the river. Many men lost their lives fighting for their freedom down in those tunnels. They say on certain moonless nights, you can hear the screams and the cries of those who died. The pirate house is now a restaurant. It's owned by a guy named Sandy. Well, Sandy tells the story of a Spanish employee that worked for him over a year and a half. Until one night, Sandy sent Jose up to the third floor to get something. He said Jose came rolling down the stairs, jumped up to his feet, ran through the front door, and never came back to work. Sandy tried calling his house for 2 days. No answer. On the third day, he went over to his house. He said when Jose answered the door, he looked pale and his voice was shaky. He asked him what had happened. Jose told him he did not slip and fall down the stairs, but was tricked by something very evil up there, and was never going in that building again. I understand, even to this day, Sandy has a $1,000 bet for anyone that could stay on the third floor all night by themselves and sober. You'll see a 3-story house. It looks like a big barn. It has 2 chimneys on top, the American flag in front. Everybody see it over there? Okay, that's the Hampton Little Bridge house. It's one of the most famous haunted houses in the United States. It was featured on History's Mysteries. Well, back in 1963, Jim Williams bought that house and moved it to that location. During the renovations, the workers complained of hearing music, laughter, and footsteps, but nothing or no one could be found. After the house was completed, it was occupied by Mr. Williams, but the noises never stopped. He found it hard to keep servants and maids who complained of the noises and a very strange presence around him. He decided to have the house exorcised. The exorcism was performed by Reverend Stewart. 10 days later, the noises were back. In the middle of the night, Mr. Williams is awakened to find a man in a suit standing in his bedroom doorway. He said the ghost just looked at him, turned around, and walked away. One evening, Jim was having a dinner party there, when mysteriously one of his guests choked to death right at the table. Shortly after, Jim Williams sold that home. The folks that live there now say that they lived in peace with the ghost. A few months ago, I had a woman on the tour with me. She told me she was half Cherokee. She also said that all her life, even as a child, she's always received messages from beyond. She's never practiced this, has never made a profession out of it. She told me frankly she wishes it would never happen. But it does. She asked me if I knew why the noises came back 10 days later. In all the books I've studied, I didn't have an answer. She told me she was just told why. 2 reasons. 1, Jim Williams paid the priest. You're not allowed to pay for an exorcism. And 2, the priest was supposed to give Jim some sort of green ring that seals the exorcism, which he never did. There's been 2 other attempts at exorcising that house, and all have failed. If you ever decide to spend the night there, be careful of what room they give you. In fact, if you stay in rooms 201 or 203, you must sign a waiver. The waiver states, paraphrasing, even if you leave in the middle of the night for whatever reason, you still have to pay. See, the Kehoe house was once a funeral home, and rooms 201 and 203 were the viewing rooms, while the embalming was done in the basement. There was a lady staying in room 203 that took the tour with me. She told me she got there the night before about 11 o'clock in the evening. She had signed a bunch of paperwork. She wasn't quite sure what she was signing. She said she felt a very weird and strange presence around her. She also mentioned she heard footsteps in the middle of the night. At both times she got up, all the lights in the room were on, but she knew she had turned them off. She made it through the night though. That next morning she went down to talk to the manager about changing rooms. There was a couple that stayed right down the hall from her that same night that was always sleeping with the manager. They were asking the manager if there was any children there. The manager said, no, there's no children here. In fact, he discouraged children from staying here because of all the antiques. But her and her husband, her children laughing and running down the hall all night long. This was once the Telfair Mansion, built in 1820. The last person to live there was a woman by the name of Mary Telfair. Upon her death, she willed her home to become a museum. Many of the family belongings are still there. One in particular is a portrait of Mary that hangs in the back of the ballroom. Many folks that have taken tours there, including myself, have noticed the eyes of that portrait will follow you everywhere you go. They once tried moving the portrait. Parts of the ceiling started falling, books fell off the shelves, and lights started flickering. Be careful if you ever decide to visit the museum, for the ghost of Mary Telfair is very much around. As you folks walk around the historic district, you'll notice a lot of these dual staircases that lead up to the same door, like this one here on your right. I was told the reason for that is back in those days, the ladies walked up one side, the gentleman walked up the other. Because if a gentleman looked at a lady's ankles, he had to marry her. If she was already married, he had to duel her husband.
Oh, God.
So I guess if she was butt ugly, you just shot yourself. And vice versa for the lady. And over here on your left is Chippewa Square. On the north side of the square, or almost on the south side, was where the Forrest Gump bench was located.
Forrest Gump.
Hollywood made 18 of those benches. They tried leaving a few of them out there, but all of them mysteriously disappeared. Run, Forrest, run. And General Sherman sent President Lincoln the famous telegram, giving the president town of Savannah as a Christmas gift when he was captured by the Union. Well, the Melvin family once lived there. They loved to play music. Many evenings after supper, they'd sit around their den and play music. They had no butler that loved to hear them play. He'd always sit around with them and tap his foot to the music. Well, the Melvin family no longer lives there, and their tapping butler has long passed away. The house now belongs to the church next door. They hold special functions in there. Many church folks have said, on occasion, when they played music in the house, they've heard a tapping sound coming from the floor. Coming up here on your left, the royal family. We're a very prominent family, military-wise. This long building directly in front of us is actually a stretch of mausoleums that house over 200 bodies. It's very, very peaceful. To spend the night with him. The room that he stayed in was a large library. There was life-size portraits of people from the Civil War era. Morning, everything was back to normal. He never told anyone what had happened to him. But just a few years later, on his deathbed, he told some of his closest friends. They rode out to this area and searched for several days, never to find the owner or the house itself. In the early 1900s, there lived a boy out here by the name of Rene. At the age of 15, Rene stood over 7 feet tall and weighed more than 300 pounds. He was a loner, didn't have any friends, and he walked the cemetery at night. One morning, the folks that work out here found a body of a little girl, dead. Many blame Rene for it. 2 days later, another body was discovered of a little boy. They hung Rene. They killed him without a trial. None of the cemeteries would accept his body, for they thought of it as evil. So they secretly buried Rene here somewhere. No one knows exactly where. But many folks that have been out here at night said they've seen a man walking through the cemetery. Locals swear if you drive through the cemetery at night with your headlights off, there's a good chance you'll catch a glimpse of Rene.
There he is!
Y'all, the Rene story is true. After Rene was killed, the murders did cease. Now, the very few sightings I've ever had on my tour of Rene or of something has always occurred on the right.
I thought I saw it. Do you want this?
No, no, no.
Guys, about a little bit over 4 months ago, I had an actual professional medium on the tour with me. This house coming up on your right, she asked me if anybody ever died in there or anything bad that I knew of ever happened in that home.
Right, every time you ask him what's that,
At the time, I didn't know. She told me as we drove by it, all the hairs on the back of her neck stood up.
A few weeks ago, I spoke with Linda that runs the office. She told me back in 1970